So the final area is in terms of how the public sector is making decisions and what impact this has on business models. Because the Climate Change Act that I referred to earlier on feeds through to departmental carbon targets, because the departments is responsible for schools or prisons or whatever they're responsible for, and have to manage those departmental assets in a way that's consistent with government targets. Otherwise they'll get hauled up in front of judicial review to say, why haven't you done it? And that would be embarrassing. So one of the ways that DCSF, Department for Children, Schools and Families, well, in fact, the way that DCSF has implemented its carbon targets, have said, oh, it's all fine, we're building lots of new schools, and BSF, Building Schools of the Future programme, will deliver all our carbon targets for us, except that Michael Gove cancelled it, and nobody seems to have asked Michael Gove how he is now going to deliver on his carbon targets, but there we are. I'm sure it'll happen at some point. In the Building Schools for the Future programme, there are two ways of delivering the programme, and the most interesting way is on this PFI basis, the Private Finance Initiative, where an organisation like Carillion, for example, is given the responsibility of owning and managing the school for 25 years, and then they hand it back under the contract. But it's a performance target. They have a carbon target in there, which is a performance target. Now that is completely different from all the ways that targets have been set in the past, because that's really hard to meet. And in a few years' time, we might have schools that are miles off their targets, and some quite interesting discussions between governments, particularly ones who want to save money, with their providers who are saying, why aren't you meeting your carbon target, and what's the penalty clause in the contract? So that's going to be really interesting, but it's a really interesting way of setting a target and putting it in a contract, and it's a model that I think could be copied elsewhere in terms of delivering procurement targets. What I really like about it, and we were having a conversation earlier on about how you account for costs and benefits, is that it's based on a whole life costing methodology, and there's Treasury have issued guidance called the Green Book on how whole life costing in the public sector should be undertaken, taking into account a 25-year life or 25-year delivery period, and all of the costs and all of the benefits. So it's the capital costs, the running costs, the replacement costs in 15 years' time if kit needs replacing, discounted back to current values. And actually, if you take whole life costing based decisions, you generally end up with much more rational, much more low carbon, much lower energy using solutions than if you persist with a first cost calculating approach. And that's why it's really important as an approach. It creates all sorts of business model opportunities.